In this episode of Spooky Action Radio, the Wookie and I will be talking to Sheryl Gottschall, President of UFO Research Queensland. Sheryl will be talking to us about all things UFO related, happening right here in southeast Queensland. So sit back, relax and prepare to be spooked right here on Spooky Action Radio. So hi Sheryl, welcome to Spooky Action Radio. Wookie's in the studio with me today. How you going?
I'm going great. It is an exciting day today.
It's exciting because, you know, we've had these conversations about all things alien and extraterrestrial that are going on in my very backyard. And I've been holding back for the last few weeks, and I'm just itching to find out from an expert such as Sheryl about the lowdown and what's going on. So how are you, Sheryl? Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. And I'm fine. I'm well. I'm cosmic.
You're cosmic now. That sounds really that's really apt for Spooky Action Radio, isn't it?
That is perfectly applicable.
So
yeah.
what's a bit of your background, Sheryl? Tell us about yourself and what is it about what you do that's attracted you in the first instance to it?
Well, gosh, gee whiz. I've had a long-term interest in the UFOs and the paranormal, and probably backtracks to since I was a kid. I'd always looked at the stars and wondered if there were other people out there, you know, looking back at Earth, wondering if there were people there looking back at them, you know. So, and I had a long time interest in the paranormal as well. And I guess somehow I got very interested in life after death to start with. So in the 1970s, I joined the International Association of Near-Death Studies. And I became very interested in that, studied it for about 10 years, quite deeply. And then I met my first husband, whose father happened to have been a member of UFO Research Queensland, which I am now president of. That was back in the 60s.
Oh, right.
So we got talking, and I found he had a similar interest. So we, you know, every week, an Italian family over dinner, we'd sit and we'd talk about aliens and UFOs and disclosure and is it possible, all those sorts of things. So from there, I joined UFO Research Queensland, and I've been a member ever since, and that was back in 1988.
30 years.
Long time.
30 years.
Yes.
Wow. So Wookie's been teasing me with this knowledge that he has that somehow southeast Queensland is just, you know, overrun with alien activity. It's a real hot spot. It's a real hotbed. But interestingly enough, Sheryl, we don't hear anything about this on the radio. We don't hear anything about these things happening on the news. Why is that? What's going on?
Well, actually, that's not quite true, because everything these days is online, I have to say. So if you go online, you'll probably get a few news articles every week about someone seen something somewhere in Queensland, or in Melbourne, or you know, in Sydney, around that area. And it's actually I post the those news articles on our Facebook page. So while you may not hear it on the radio or on TV, it's certainly online.
Oh, right.
You do have to go hunting for it, though.
You do. Well, you do, but that's why we have a Facebook page.
That's right. If you know where to look, you can find it.
And do you get everyone who has a conspiracy or has a standpoint or a viewpoint that's a little bit left of center, they get treated with quite a heavy dose of, you know, skepticism. And you get labeled very quickly. Have you had any sort of experience with that, like that sort of adversity or negativity?
Yes, when I first got involved in the UFO subject 30 years ago, and probably for that first 10 years, the ridicule factor was still very high. And I found, though, that that's changed over time. It's, keeps lowering. And probably about the year 2000, things seemed to change, because around 2000, scientists started to change their point of view about whether we're alone in the universe, to, well, you know, maybe we're not alone in the universe, to, well, now it's highly unlikely that we're alone in the universe. So I've seen that evolution over that 30-year period, but definitely those that ridicule factor was very high in the late 80s, early 90s.
What do you reckon caused that that skepticism, that ridicule factor back then?
I think it's still current today for those people who are very skeptical about the UFO subject, about the existence of life elsewhere in the universe. It's a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to the unknown, I think. So, and I think that's natural. It's healthy to be like that. It's part of our survival to reject things that we don't know about. We're sort of all hardwired that way through, naturally for survival. And I think it's also a bit scary to some people. I know years ago I used to work in retail, and the people used to say, I'm interested in the subject, but it scares me. So they don't know what to do or how to think about or even how to feel about how, what would it be like if extraterrestrials were walking among us? Of course, I think they actually do in some cases.
Oh, really?
Oh, I do. Yes, I think some of them are
What, like in Queensland?
Yeah, I think some of them are so human-looking that they can move among us, study our race, and what better way to get to know a civilization than to walk among them? If you even go back to the Bible, it says there, beware of entertaining. I can't remember the exact quote, but entertaining strangers because they may be angels in disguise, but actually they may be extraterrestrials in disguise.
And that warning's pretty common amongst a lot of cultures around the world, isn't it? I mean, they always warn, be careful just how you treat strangers because you don't know who those strangers really are.
Wow. So if I was going to, what would give it away? Like, obviously, I have absolutely, no real experience with having never ever met an alien that I know of. Although I've been sus on a couple of ex-girlfriends, but most definitely, I don't think that I've met an alien, and I certainly haven't seen any strange objects in the sky. So, for someone who's had very limited experience in this, what sort of stuff should I be looking for, Sheryl?
Well, first of all, if you're talking about sightings, let's just say of a UFO in the sky, you're looking for it to do something that we know that our current technology doesn't seem to be able to do. And I have to say that pushing aside secret technology that, the public may never know about. So when witnesses see something that goes from horizon to horizon in 1 to 2 seconds flat, it's not from our current technology. So that's in relation to craft. If we're looking at extraterrestrial beings, certainly some of them from reports I've received, look very human looking, but they have this ability to be telepathic with us. And in some cases, they can actually telepathically, I guess you'd say, prod us to go outside and see their craft for, I don't know why. I have their own reasons. In other cases, they can, and maybe not human-looking extraterrestrials, but they can manipulate us mentally to perhaps do things or to allay fears so that when we're with them, we're not, so frightened out of our minds that we can't even cope. So there are just a few things, but people have reported all types of beings to me over the years. Through the 90s, we had the little grey aliens. Well, obviously, they're not human. They just, obviously, by looking at them, you can say, well, they're not from here.
Yeah.
So, that's pretty easy to see.
Okay. But what I've always thought about little grey aliens is that if they evolved somewhere else, completely separate to the Earth, like in their own evolutionary track, completely away from the Earth, what are the odds that such beings would evolve to look so anatomically similar to us? 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, ears, 2 arms, 2 legs, fingers. The odds of that evolving randomly are just microscopic. The Australian Aboriginals, they actually do have a fairly rich, reasonably open history, if you ask, about people from the stars. Is that right?
Well, I've only really come in contact with someone of Aboriginal heritage in the last couple of years that I can tell you that from one person to another. There's not a lot of accounts in history about their past, but the woman I'm thinking of spoke at one of our monthly meetings, and she said that there were markings on some of the rocks I think it was in the Flinders Ranges in South Australia that are so old they're starting to fall off the side of the rocks. And she said even the Aboriginal people don't know where they came from. So they have no connection to those in relation to how that fits in with their own ancestry. But in relation to the Aboriginal people, they certainly do. She said they certainly do feel a connection to some of the other planets, and particularly Sirius. So that star system seems to play some sort of a connection in their history. And there's also a UFO researcher, an Australian UFO researcher called Rex Gilroy, who's also collected some stories from Aboriginal people who talk about large eggs that crash landed on planet Earth and beings got out of them. So, you've got to wonder, what the heck is that about?
What I would love to know a little bit more about is the organization that you're involved with now. What's some of the things that you're trying to achieve with the organization? And I guess, what's some of the more interesting things that have happened recently in our area? Is there anything of note that we should really be having a look in the night sky for, or is there anything that you would like to share with us?
Well, in regard to reports from the Redcliffe area, we haven't actually received any so far this year. They've been all over the place, all over Queensland. But that's not unusual because, being the only UFO organisation in Queensland at this stage, and even sometimes we receive reports from all over Australia too. It just depends, because people find it hard to find places where they can report things. But I can tell you that some of the reports that we did receive just in February, one was from Rockhampton, and that came in it happened in 1969. And he reported this on the 2nd of February. And I'm not really sure why this happens, but often people will report things years and years and years later. And anyway, this man reported having experience in 1969 when he and his brother were children. And they were living in a small place near Rockhampton where their father was managing a cattle station. And the boys shared a room. And one night between 10 and 11 p.m, the boys went to bed and they lay in their beds talking as children do before going to sleep. Well, one of them got up to turn off the light, and about 5 minutes later they began to nod off to sleep. And then suddenly a bright light flooded the room, which woke them up. And we have many reports like that. So they got up to look out the window to see what it could be. Of course, living on a cattle station out in the middle of nowhere, you'd think, well, what the heck is that? So there was a tree about 6 meters from the house, and it was lit up by the light. And when they looked up to see the source of the light, they could see a shiny object hovering over the tree. And it appeared to look egg-shaped on top and with a fried egg shape underneath. This is how he described it, as from a boy's memory.
Wow.
So the brothers immediately became terrified at what they were looking at, and as this object continued to hang silently over the tree. And this is another telltale sign that you were asking me about before, is there's some sort of technology and it's silent. It makes no more noise at all. So the light from the UFO was so bright, it shone into the forest, and that was located about 1/2 kilometre from the house. So you can imagine how bright that was. Anyway, the boys watched it for no longer than 5 seconds before it disappeared. But 5 seconds is a pretty good amount of time to get a good look at something that you're not familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so they ran into the parents' bedroom and spluttering about what they'd seen. but their father just sort of cast it off as the boys playing a prank. But a couple of months later, a cigar-shaped object appeared over the father when he was with his stock hands, and they were out on a cattle muster. So the father sort of had to eat crow then, because he saw something unusual that he couldn't explain, you know. And I could just imagine boys saying, "Told you so, told you so." Anyway, one of the brothers has since died, and so only one witness remains to this sighting. But that man, when I spoke to him on the phone, said that he still feels extremely nervous to this day as a result of his childhood UFO sighting. And he said that whatever he saw that night, he and his brother saw, it was not from Earth. There is definitely someone else out there, and they don't need a passport.
Well, it's not that easy to get
So
one.
that
I mean,
was-
you know, they might have the technology, but do they have the negotiation skills to get one of those things? I don't know.
But, you know, if you unpack that sighting report, there was a lot of information in there. Firstly, the boys are out on a cattle station outside of Rockhampton somewhere. You know, there's not going to be any proper other, you know, lights around that are going to come up and hang over a tree and emit this light that's so bright it's shining off at least half a kilometre into the distance. And then the description of it, you know, and it's not making any sound. It's hanging silently there over this tree. And the boy or the man, obviously to me, because I'm a therapist, so I think that he's still possibly got some post-traumatic stress disorder that he's dealing with ever since he was a child. And that comes up quite often. So, you know, there's a whole lot of information in there that sort of adds a weight to evidence for something not of this world.
All right.
Do you think maybe there's something more happened that that he's not comfortable with talking about just yet that would have led to the PTSD?
Well, it could be that, or it could be that something did happen, but it hasn't come to his conscious awareness as yet. It's hard to say. Yeah. So that's what happens with people if they have a close encounter, and that happened to myself as well. But mine wasn't so lengthy a suppression of the memory. It was only till later the next day. But people can, you know, something dramatic can happen to them, and the unconscious mind will suppress that memory until the individuals, I guess you'd say, in a equilibrium can withstand the conscious knowledge of that experience.
It's actually funny because I think you might have been just in my mind a couple of moments ago, Sheryl, when you were talking about your experience. I was just going to ask you, what's something that you've experienced that's really, really stood out for you?
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. So you're getting real spooky on me here, Wookie. I think maybe Wookie might be an alien. I don't know.
No, there's no aliens here.
But do you have obviously?
There could be. Could
You've
be.
alluded. He could be. It could be. He wants to be. I think that's an aspiration of his. But look, you know, I'd be very interested to hear in your own words. You know, if you mind sharing with our listeners,
Sure.
something that's happened to you, that you can't explain, and how it's affected you. Because I know that when this show goes to air, and there'll be people in the Redcliffe area, the Greater North Brisbane area, that are going, you know what? These things that these people are talking about, I saw something like that. I don't know who to contact. I don't know who to share it with. And even if I did, I don't know if I would, because I don't want people thinking I'm crazy. I don't want to be stigmatized in that way. But I guess if you are listening to this, folks, and you are getting a bit of commonality out of this, a bit of shared experience, you're not alone. And there are a lot of people that have seen things and experienced things that they can't understand. And I'm sure Sheryl will be able to share with us at the end of this program how you can report it, how you can share this information so that we can collectively paint a bigger and better picture of what's exactly going on out there.
Sure. Well, I'm happy to share my own experiences.
Excellent.
I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I'd
it.
love to.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've had various UFO sightings, but I've had two very good sightings, but I've also had a close encounter, and maybe listeners might be more interested to hear about that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that happened and I still don't know the year. I can't sort of figure it out, but it was about 1990, 1991, sometime then. And I had gone to bed and my husband was in bed with me at the time, and he was an insomniac. I couldn't breathe the wrong way without him waking up. So it was in the early hours of the morning, and I woke up for some unknown reason, and I looked towards the window, and standing probably about a metre between the edge of my bed and the window were these three small beings. And they probably were about no more than 4 feet tall, maybe 3.5 feet tall. And they were silhouetted by the street light outside. Now, I'm completely awake because by now I'm looking at these things, waking up out of a dead sleep, and, you see this standing beside the bed looking at you. So
Sheryl, where was this?
I was living in Mount Gravatt at the time.
Mount Gravatt.
So you
I
don't
always knew.
Yes.
Always knew something about the South Side.
Wow.
So you don't need to be in some isolated place, to have these sort of experiences. And I've spoken to many people who've been in cities. So I saw these three beings, and it was this. I was terror struck. I'd heard people talking about these, not like this, but the feelings that they had after having the experience, and I was terror struck. I could suddenly relate to what they were saying, and It was almost like if you could imagine yourself being asleep and waking up to see a lion just staring at you very close. There's not a thing you can do. You can't run. You're afraid to run. Nothing. It was the same sense. And yet, the interesting thing is, I'm not a short woman. I'm 5'7" or 172 centimeters tall. And I could have easily gotten up and just knocked those beings away. They were so small. Would have been like three little kids, So, but I think it was because of the way they looked, because they were so alien to me, so completely dissimilar to anything that I had ever seen before, that I was really frightened. Anyway, I did a very strange thing. I pulled the sheet up over my head and I started saying the Lord's Prayer. And I didn't even know that I still knew that from Sunday school, but apparently I did. And the next thing I know, it's morning.
Wow.
And I'm just waking up. I have no memory of the experience. Go about my normal morning routine. I had a little girl. And it was later in the afternoon, after lunchtime, that something triggered my memory. And it was just like the memory just flooded back into my mind. And I went, oh, my God, that happened last night. And I've had a lot of I've thought about it a lot over the years, as you can imagine. I'm thinking, well, because the first 15 years I told myself it was a hallucination. After that, I really did, because I thought, no, that didn't happen. It was just my mind making it up. But the more I listened to people's stories about, their own experiences that were similar, and I've thought about it a lot more, and there's things about it that can't be explained, like, if I was so terrified, how could I go to sleep? Was one. The other one was, I have this memory of these big dark eyes, and yet how could I remember those eyes if their faces, if they were silhouetted and their faces were dark, like in shadow? That doesn't add up either. So I've had a few questions about the whole experience, in recent years, and as I'm sure a lot of other people do.
Like, isn't it funny though? Well, it's not really funny. It's quite concerning. You have something that's so traumatic that happens to you, but because it's so unusual, it's like you sort of left holding the bag, going, okay, well, A, who do I talk to about this? And B, even if I could talk to someone, are they going to believe me?
Yes. And I think another thing that stopped me talking to anyone about it was the fact that I was actually involved in the research side. I was, in those days, at that time, I was out in the field, like, interviewing people in their homes, gathering their testimony and recording that. So, and I was having a hard time coming to terms with having had an experience myself and thinking, I'm telling myself, oh, this is just their stories muddling up in my head. And frankly, I don't even want to talk about this publicly, because then they'll think, well, Sheryl's a loony. So, as a researcher, what do you can't sort of, you have concerns, at least in those days I did, about what the public would think about that, So I was very reticent about speaking about it.
And did you, when you did decide to talk to someone, who was it? Who was the person that you reached out to, and what sort of reception did you get? Was it supportive, or were they critical, or judgmental, or a bit of everything?
Well, it was actually one of my colleagues I opened up to, um, who was involved with the group at that time, and I told them about it, and he said, "Well, have you really seriously thought about what you've just said? Some of it doesn't seem logical." And I think he was the one who said, "Well, how do you have a memory of these eyes if the face was in shadow?" That sort of thing. And this happens over and over again. I've found that some parts of people's stories, they're going, "I can't see the logical link between step 2 and step 4. There's a piece missing," and I guess that's when I hear those types of stories, that's where my little antenna goes up and says, maybe something else has gone on here for these people.
When I guess you've spoken clearly to a lot of different people over the years, a lot of different walks of life. And I guess you're going to come across people that aren't being totally honest with you as well. And I guess you found that. Is there a way that you can discern whether someone's being honest with you or not? Is it because of the shared experience and those common elements that we've spoken about, or is there something a little bit more subtle than that?
Well, if you're referring to hoaxes, for example,
Yeah, absolutely.
I've found that the people who hoax this are usually kids, usually boys, and usually between 10 to 14. So when they ring up and they start telling me about something, they often just can't keep a straight face. They start laughing and hang up. So that's obviously they're just having
It's like some of our clients, Colin.
they're just having fun, and boys will be boys. I get
Yeah,
I get
well,
that.
yeah.
Um,
Mm,
of course, there can be some people who are a bit deluded. They may be, or they may be wanting to interpret some strange experience as a contact experience or a UFO experience. And hey, let's face it, there are so many strange experiences that people have.
yeah.
That it's a very large umbrella to put them all under. So I don't know about all experiences that exist for people, and frankly, experiences are subjective for people too. So you're looking at or you're listening to stories that have, I guess you say, been interpreted by people because they're trying to understand it. They're trying to find a context for it to fit, so that there's someone else who's had that experience too, and they don't feel so alone. So it's a matter of
As you're, sorry to interrupt. As you're talking about these scenarios and these experiences, like it's not all doom and gloom, is it? It's not all those feelings of dread and terror, and because of the foreign nature of what you're trying to struggle to comprehend. Have there been any dead set hilarious alien encounters? That's what I want to know. Like, have you had these stories from people that have just said, "This thing happened to me. I can't explain it, but it was really, really comical. It was funny, or it was just so left of center compared to your usual range of contacts."
no. It'll work. No.
Well, there goes.
I've actually been told of one that I can share.
Well, here we go.
Yeah. So basically, this guy, he wakes up in the middle of the night. He's on like a stainless steel table or something like that. He's got a sheet over him. Hovering over him is like a couple of greys, the standard sort of abduction type situation. And he told me that he was so in shock by how stereotypical his experience was, that he looked at the grey alien that was looking back at him, who appeared to be who had become aware that he was awake. And the only thing he could think to ask is, "So while we're here, do you do lipo?" And apparently the look on the grey's face was a bit incredulous. And then the next thing you know, he's waking up in the morning. Apparently greys don't do lipo.
Or stand up.
Or stand up. They're not big talkers, I hear.
No.
No.
From your experience, which is quite extensive, there hasn't been any, I guess, like comical's not really the term for it, but there hasn't been any experience or contact that's been less than traumatic or serious for people that have actually experienced it.
Yes, definitely. There have been close encounters that people feel very uplifted by, if that's what you're asking. They feel positive, and they look forward to having another contact. And back in the 50s and 60s, there were a lot of people in that era particularly who had very positive experiences, and they referred to extraterrestrials as space brothers. So it's not all traumatic or doom and gloom.
And positive experiences today aren't that uncommon either, are they?
No, they're not. And that's an interesting point. I don't know if we have time to go into that, but let me just say this, that they're in the public or in the arenas where this show will be and documentaries are about the subject, etc., and people are watching them. There is an emotional climate that is developed, and if the emotional climate is positive, then people will report positive experiences. If it is negative, like it was a lot during the 1990s with alien abduction experiences, you had prolific amounts of frightening reports, then people will report those experiences because people don't want to feel different to other people, so they'll just keep their mouth shut. So while today we're hearing of more positive experiences from people, it doesn't necessarily mean that those other experiences aren't happening as well.
Could it be that there might have been like a change in, I don't know, alien policy or something like that as far as how they're relating to us? Could that be responsible for the change in the way people are experiencing these things?
Yes, I think that the phenomenon may have changed itself because it is a responsive phenomenon. So, look, the agenda may have changed, extraterrestrial agenda may have changed. The people that they're contacting may have changed. Who knows? It's just changed.
So all these things happening that have been reported to yourself and your organisation over many, many, many years, what sort of government, contact have you had with regards to this? Any sort of rebuttal, any sort of confirmation? How is it treated? What's the policy at the moment with regards to how local Australian governments treat this phenomenon, how they respond to it? Are they acknowledging it? Are they denying it?
Well, in Australia, they're not acknowledging it. They're not talking about it. And anyone who rings, say, the RAF Amberley Air Base, is probably going to get a bit of a, yeah, okay, how much have you been drinking sort of attitude down the phone at them, And yet, some years ago, I was doing a professional development course at the Australian College of Applied Psychology, and there was a man there changing his career, and he was a air traffic controller. And he said that, yes, they absolutely do see unusual things on radar and that they can't explain. And there is a phone number that they have to call and report that to, but that's it. They never hear about it again. In regard to the policy, I can tell you that in 1994, the Australian Department of Defence sent a letter around to all civilian UFO organisations saying that they would no longer be dealing with the UFO subject, and they felt that civilian groups like ours had better resources and could help the public deal with it in a better way, which really basically says, look, we don't want anything to do with this. We don't think it's a matter of national security. You guys are all volunteers. You've obviously got time to spare. You do it. That was what it was, really.
Oh, wow. But have you ever seen any or heard of any, Sheryl, of any, defense resources being mobilized on the back of a sighting? Like a lot of these sightings happening and civilians are calling them in. But is it the case where sometimes you will get a sighting of an unidentified flying object, and then in close proximity to it, you will have it being tailgated or an attempted intercept by civilian aircraft?
Well, not so much civilian aircraft, but I think that anything that comes into our atmosphere is immediately tracked, and that is not supposed to be there, obviously. And there's a case that brings that to mind, comes to mind, was about probably about 15 years ago, where there was a man living in Richlands in the west of Brisbane, and he called and he said to me that he was a retired Green Beret soldier, and that he was living in a little bungalow on some lady's property out there. But anyway, he had seen something unusual in the sky, and it had come down on the back of this woman's acreage property. So he called us immediately and gave us the report. And then only a short time later, he rang up and he abused me for giving out his address and phone number. And I said, well,
Wow.
You didn't even give me your address and phone number, so I didn't give it to anybody. But he said that because two people rocked up to his front door, and he let them in, and they came to see what he was doing, and it appeared, and basically tried to intimidate him, which was not easy to do, as if he was indeed a retired Green Beret officer, and they left. So
they weren't wearing black suits, were they?
No. You know what? I hate to tell you this, but they
Oh, no, come on. You had time to prep for this interview. You could have come up with a better story than that, surely.
They were. Let's suck it up, boys, because they were.
Oh, well, there you go. There's truth in Men in Black.
it's-
I've got to get myself one of those neuralizers, though, Cheryl. I reckon that's the stuff. I could use that at work. I could use that anywhere.
I could really do with one of those things.
That would be just awesome.
Yeah, that would be helpful, wouldn't it? But there's a good example, I think, of something being tracked close to him, because within minutes of calling me, they were at his front door.
Wow.
So they were tracking this thing that had come down, on the property, and who knows what it was, and I'll never know. And I don't even know if he'll ever know. But there you go.
It was probably bog gas.
Bog gas?
Bog gas.
Oh, right.
Yeah, they can do amazing stuff. Bog gas and
Weather balloons and all that sort of deal.
yeah.
So if I've got a mind, and I do, at least half of one, so I'm told, to get out there and look to the skies and see what I can see, and maybe have my first experience with the unexplained, what are the hot spots? Like in Brisbane, I'm based on the north side. Spook Central is on the north side of Brisbane. What should we be looking for? Where should we be looking? Are there places that our listeners can go out to right now and have a decent shot at seeing something extraordinary?
Well, you know what? I think the best place to see something is from your own backyard, because people report seeing things all over the place, and it can be. I mean, had a sighting late last year, just as I was heading into the M7 tunnel from the north side of Brisbane to come out to the western suburbs. So I looked up; it was daylight. I saw this strange, long white cigar-shaped object with an very unusual half circle to one side of it that I could not, I don't know what it was. So that was like about 2 p.m. So you can go on all these sky watches, and they're great because you learn a lot from other people. But I think, if you can go out when there's no moon, and you can go out a little bit away from the city lights, even if you're looking away from the city lights into a darker sky, and get the apps on your phones and on your iPads, and the flight tracker and the ISS tracker.
Apps, right.
Yep, all those things. And
I thought you were going to tell me. I thought you were going to tell me, Cheryl, that there's a Find an Alien app, and that I could buy.
No, I'd like one. It'd be like Find My iPad or Find My
Well, there you
iPhone,
go.
you
It's
know,
just
like one of those apps. Find My Alien, I don't know.
it's like a Go Grey app or something like that. I don't
Something
know.
like that.
But I think, you know, I think the most important thing to being able to observe these things, to being able to see them, is being open to them in the first place. I think a lot of people see a lot of things that could be UFOs, but because their minds just aren't in the right place at the right time, they're just not seeing them. They're ignoring them.
Well, I would agree with you to a certain point on that, but also conversely, skeptics ring up and say, I never believed in this stuff till I saw something. You know, so you know, that's some of the, what can I say? How can I say this nicely, Colin? That's one of those mythologies that sort of go around, UFO mantras, let's call them that go around and around and around. It has to be this, and this to see a UFO. You know, I'm not convinced of that. Only from the people that I've spoken to over the years, which I have to say is probably well over 3,500 now. So,
Wow.
you know, people, skeptics, believers, wannabes, whatever, and scientists and pilots and policemen and teachers all see these things, whether they want to see them or not sometimes, you know. So I don't think you have to believe it to see it.
Oh, not necessarily believe it, but what I mean is that you've got to be looking at the sky to see something.
Yeah.
And so many of us, I think, spend most of our time so focused on getting to where we've got to go and getting to in the car and doing our jobs and that sort of stuff. Very few people get that moment to look up at the sky and just see what's there.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's we're certainly a downward-looking society these days, aren't we? Especially when our nose is buried in our iPhones.
That's right. That's why we need to find our aliens app. Maybe that's something that the research people could be working on. Maybe that's something that you guys can work on. That'd be awesome.
Well, I think it's your great idea. Why don't you look into it?
I've got all the ideas in the world. I just can't back them up.
Okay.
But look, you know, you got part of a fabulous organization. Now, we want to put people in contact with you guys because I know that there are a lot of people out there right now that are listening to Spooky Action Radio that are listening to these stories that would want to be able to share their stories with people like yourself that are very interested in documenting them, that want to listen to them, that will take them seriously. How do I contact your organization? What do I need to do? Where do I need to go? Whereabouts are you online?
Well, if you search UFO Research Queensland, you'll find our website, so you can send us an email. We've also got a Facebook page of the same name, UFO Research Queensland. We've got a YouTube channel, so you can go on there and look at the various speakers that we've had in the last few years, at least. And I think we've got quite a few, over 1,000 subscribers at the moment, to people who want to hear the latest about, the research. What are researchers finding out about the subject? And of course they can phone us, so they can find the phone number on the website and on the Facebook page.
If you want to reach out to Wookie and myself, we're available. So if you want to leave us a message, that's fine. And who knows, we might even feature one of your stories on the radio program, which is
that's a good idea.
Exactly what we want to do. And Cheryl, we're going to be out there actually interviewing locals and getting local stories about some of the most peculiar things that have happened to them. Not just UFO, a lot of paranormal stuff as well. And we're going to have different subject matter experts on the program and sharing their experiences as well. But we'd love to have you back on a regular basis and keep us appraised of, what's happening right here in our own backyard.
Yeah, happy to do so, because there's a lot to tell, and we want to get it out there too. It's the greatest story never told.
The greatest story never told. Any parting words of wisdom for our listeners, Cheryl? Anything that might help them, even for a newbie like myself, who's just starting out, curious mind, very open to these new experiences? What sort of advice would you give someone like me?
Look, I would say don't be afraid of looking into this subject, because it's we're stepping into our cosmic heritage here. We're growing up as a species on planet Earth. If there is a place out there in the galactic neighborhood for us to become cosmic citizens, we've got to take that step. We need to take that step for our own society to advance. So don't be scared, because you won't be alone. There's a lot of people out there who've had experiences. And there's a lot of people like myself and you guys who want to hear about these experiences. So please do let us know.
Yeah, very, very well said. And look, if I'm out there right now and I want to become a member of UFO Research Queensland, how do I go about doing it? What's the costs involved? All that sort of deal for our listeners.
Sure. Well, you can go if you want to be a member of UFO Research Queensland. You can go online, visit our website, and you can join online. And what that entitles you to is we have monthly public meetings, so you get a discount to come into those meetings. And if we have a conference or a seminar or any type of special events, members will always get a discount. And they'll also get 6 issues of our publication, our journal, UFO Encounter, that comes out bi-monthly, so you get 6 of those for a year. So that's, you get some good information in there. You get a lot of the latest reports and articles, latest research developments. So, yeah.
It's a very good publication. Yeah.
Cool. And do I get a free I Want to Believe t-shirt as well?
I don't have any. I want to, do I have any of those? I'm sure I could send you guys a couple of those shirts. I know we've got.
Well,
we've got
there you go. You got
with,
to be careful what you ask for. Thanks, mate. Thank you very much for your time today. We'll let you go.
Right, thanks.
Thanks, Sheryl.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye
Thank
now.
you. Bye-bye.
And remember, spooks, if you'd like to share your spooky stories, you can find Spooky Action Radio on Facebook.